A few years back, my 19-year-old son was asked if I was a hover mom. He answered no, she's more of a satellite mom. She doesn't really care so much what I'm up to, but she always seems to know. With that said, a few years back, that parenting style was challenged. As a matter of fact, he was 11. It was an ordinary spring day. The windows were open. My husband was milling about. Miller was in the yard playing with his friend Jesse. And I was settling in with a book on the sectional. There's a loud crash outside, and the cat came bolting across the furniture and planted his back claws into my eye, slicing it open. As I reached up and felt the dampness, all I could think of was that his paw spent a lot of time in a litter box, and I had no idea how to get my eye clean without hurting my eyeball. So I called my mom. She's a cat person. She's particularly concerned with cleanliness, and she's exactly the kind of person that you want in your corner in a panic. So I'm trying to hold up the phone and dig through the medicine cabinet looking for Bactine or hydrogen peroxide or something to get my eye cleaned. I hear a quiet voice from the back of the house saying, "Mama, I fell off a ladder. I think I hurt myself." Well, I dropped everything I was doing because my mother raised me to be the kind of person to be in your corner in the panic, and went straight to my son. As I'm walking down the hall, I'm trying to imagine what on earth possessed him to get on a ladder without me there. And then I remembered that his entire life, I haven't minded if he does things like get on ladders. And so I decide to refrain from interrogating him. And I'm pretty happy about that when I see his arm with a big bulging knot off of the side and his hand nearly perpendicular to his wrist. "Miller, I think we're going to have to go to the emergency room." He tells me, "No, Mom, I'm fine. I can shake it off." Now, let me be clear. He wasn't afraid to go to the doctor. This is a kid who's only ever gone to the doctor for well visits except for an ear infection when he was about 4 months old. He didn't want to quit playing with Jesse. So he said, "Mom, I can shake it off." In our family, shake it off is really what we say. We don't want to abbreviate adventure. When he first learned to ride his bike and fell and got a road rash, I said, "Babe, you can totally shake it off. Let's keep going." When he was a little older, slipped and fell and got a goose egg on his forehead, I said, "We can stop if you want to, but maybe you can shake it off." And he, in fact, shook it off, and we went on our way. So now he sat looking at me, pleading, "Mom, let this be a time I can shake it off." Well, I knew better. And I said, "No, we're going to have to go to the hospital." So we took a deep breath, and I called for my husband, John, to meet us at the door. I stopped by the kitchen, grab a fresh kitchen towel for my eye, a bag of peas for Miller's arm, and go to meet my husband at the door. He's standing there holding my keys, not his, and he reminds me that he cannot drive. He cannot drive because 2 months before, he fainted at a restaurant with no explanation, which was finally only concluded to be called a cardio-neurosyncope episode of some kind, and has been restricted for driving for 6 months. He had 4 months to go. So I stand up straight, take a deep breath, and we march out the door. I settle into the front seat with my hand holding the bloody rag on my eye. My son crawls into the back seat with my 6'4" husband and his friend Jessica, whose grandmother we have not been able to reach. John is desperately trying the entire way to the hospital to hold Miller's arm steady and to keep the ice pack on it so he will neither pass out or vomit in the car. When we arrived at Children's Hospital, the security guard sees my eye and his wrist and with a loud gulp sends us back to the doctors directly. John, on the other hand, who tries to follow us, he detours to the check-in desk where he and Jesse are asked a few extra questions by the gal checking him in because of, I guess, the condition of my eye and Miller's arm. When we get to the back, the doctors finally give him some pain medication after a quick examination, and what proceeded to happen can only be described by the images that you see in medieval medical procedure books. They twisted and poked and prodded his hand as they x-rayed it, which I think caused more pain than the initial break. Then they took us to a small room, where John and Jesse joined us, that was made only of curtains. In the room, they searched desperately in his swollen arm, poking and prodding, trying to find a vein so they can get lidocaine and fill it from elbow to the tips of his fingers. Once his arm was flooded with lidocaine, they took us into our own procedure room, where they hung his fingers by mesh finger traps and suspended 40 pounds of weight from his elbow. I have never seen anything that looked more scary, but he was very distracted because they have a video for them to watch in the hour or more that it took for the arm to realign so it could be set. While we were waiting, the doctor asked us over to the x-ray room to look at the x-ray. And as we were looking at the x-ray, she said, I want you to notice here that the break is pretty close to his growth plates. And that could be a problem. Why? I asked. Well, if it's too close to the growth plates, it's possible that the arm will not continue to grow. Not continue to grow. Well, what will happen if his arm doesn't continue to grow? Well, at that point, you will have to make a decision about whether or not you want to stop the growth in the other arm as well, or have him have two different length arms. What are we supposed to do about it? I asked. And she says, well, you'll just have to get with our arm and wrist specialist and we'll have to keep an eye on it. And by the way, in case you're wondering, I think he's going to be around 6'6". Upon hearing 6'6", all I can imagine is I'm going to have a 6'6" foot giant living in my house with T-Rex arms. In the end, we saw Dr. Ryrick, the wonderful wrist specialist at Arkansas Children's Hospital. His arms did grow back, and he is in fact a 6'6" man, 6'6" foot 19-year-old man with perfectly proportioned arms. What I'm most happy about in that whole episode is that it didn't cause me to drastically change the way I parent, as confirmed a few years later by the question, is your mom a hover mom? It's not that I don't worry sometimes. I still do, especially every time he goes scuba diving, which is all too often for me, and I worry that every time he's going to fry his brain because somehow his oxygen tanks aren't going to work. But what I'm particularly pleased about is that I managed to keep all my anxiety on the inside, and that he's grown up to be an adventurous human being. And through the mishaps of his adventures, he is in fact becoming the kind of person that you want to have in your corner in a panic.